I'm going to read you 2 chapters this morning because chapter 14 and 15 are a little bit shorter. So here we go. So chapter 14 is a bogey on the ceiling. No, no, please, pleaded the newsagent. I don't like it. I don't like it. Ding! An old lady entered the shop and looked up bemused at the newsagent perched on the top of his counter. Raj was clutching his trouser legs, what little hair he had on his head standing on end, and he was trampling all the newspapers in terror with his big clumsy feet. Ah, hello, Miss Bennet, said Raj, his voice shaking. Your knitting weekly is on the shelf. You can pay me next time. What on earth are you doing up there? Inquired the old lady quite reasonably. Raj looked over at Zoe. Surreptitiously, she put her finger to her mouth, imploring him not to tell. She didn't want everyone to know she had a rat, or soon the news would spread to the estate and her dreaded stepmother. Unfortunately, though, Raj was not a natural liar. Well, I just bought some space dust, said Zoe, stepping in. You know, the popping sweets. It'd been left out in the sun and became highly explosive, and when I opened the bag, it sprayed all over the shop. Yes, Miss Zoe, chimed in Raj. A most regrettable incident, because it's only been 15 years since I had the shop repainted. I'm just trying to pick the space dust off the ceiling. Raj came across a particularly ingrained piece of dirt on the ceiling and scratched at it. Space dust everywhere, Mrs. Bennet. Please pay me next week. The old lady shot him an unconvinced look and peered up at the ceiling. That's not space dust. That's just a piece of snot. No, Mrs. Bennet. That's where you are wrong. Look. Reluctantly, Raj used his fingernail to prise away the bogey. He had long since sneezed up there and popped it in his mouth. Pop, he added unconvincingly. Oh, I love space dust. Mrs. Bennet looked at the newsagent as if he was quite mad. It looked more like a big piece of snot to me, she muttered before leaving the shop. Ding! Raj quickly spat out the ancient bogey. Look, the little thing is not going to hurt you, said Zoe. She gently took him out of her pocket. Cautiously, Raj clambered down and slowly approached his worst nightmare. He's only a baby, said Zoe encouragingly. Soon Raj was at eye level with the rodent. Oh, well, he is a particularly pretty one. Look at his dinky little nose, said Raj with a sweet smile. What's his name? Armitage, answered Zoe confidently. And there's Raj meeting Armitage. Why is he called that? Asked Raj. Zoe was embarrassed she had named her pet after a make of toilet and simply said, Oh, it's a long story. Give him a stroke. No, he won't hurt you. If you're sure, I promise. Come here, little Armitage, whispered the newsagent. The rat squirmed closer to Raj to be stroked by this frightened-looking man. He made a lunge at me, shouted Raj, and with that he ran out of the shop, waving his arms in the air. Ding! Zoe followed him out and saw he was halfway down the street, running so fast he would give the Olympic gold-winning sprinters a run for their money. Come back! She shouted. Raj stopped and turned round and reluctantly plodded back past the row of shops to his one. When he finally tiptoed the last few paces towards the girl and her pet, Zoe said, He was just trying to say hello. No, sorry, but he got quite close. Don't be a baby, Raj. I know, sorry, he's really lovely. Raj took a deep breath and reached out to give Armitage the gentlest little stroke. It's nippy out. Let's take him inside. Ding! What am I going to do with him, Raj? My stepmother won't let me keep him at home, especially if the little fella got me suspended from school. That woman hated my hamster. She's never in a million years going to let me keep a rat. Raj thought for a moment. To aid concentration, he popped an extra strong mint in his mouth. Maybe you should set him free, said the newsagent finally. Free? Said Zoe, a single tear welling in her eye. Yes, rats are not meant to be pets. But this little one is so cute. Perhaps, but he is going to grow. He can't spend his whole life in your blazer pocket. But I love him, Raj. I really do. No doubt, Miss Zoe, said Raj, crunching on his extra strong mint. And if you love him, you should set him free. Chapter 15, 10-ton truck. So this was goodbye. Zoe knew deep down she would never be able to keep Armitage for long. There was 100 reasons, but the most important one was he was a rat. Children don't have rats as pets. They have cats and dogs and hamsters and gerbils and guinea pigs and mice and rabbits and terrapins and tortoises. Posh ones even sometimes have ponies, but never rats. Rats live in sewers, not in little girls' bedrooms. Zoe trudged miserably out of Raj's shop. The newsagent may sometimes try and sell his customers a half-eaten chocolate bar, or put a partially sucked toffee bonbon back in the sweet jar. But all the local kids knew that when it came to advice, he was the best. And that meant she had to say goodbye to Armitage. So Zoe took the long way back to her flats through the park. She thought this would be the perfect place to set little Armitage free. There would be crusts of bread left out for the ducks for him to eat, a pond for him to drink from, and maybe even take the occasional bath in. And perhaps there was a squirrel or two who he could befriend, or at least one day be on nodding terms with. The little girl carried the little rat in her hand for the last part of the journey. As it was the middle of the afternoon, the park was all but empty, save for a few old ladies being walked by their dogs. Armitage wrapped his tail around her thumb. It was almost as if he sensed something was amiss, and he clung on to her little fingers as tightly as he could. Trudging along as slowly as possible, Zoe eventually reached the middle of the park. She stopped a good distance from the yapping dogs and hissing swans and barking park keeper. Slowly, she crouched down to the ground and unclosed her hand. Armitage didn't move. It was as if he didn't want to be parted from his new friend. He cuddled up into her hand, breaking Zoe's heart as he did it. Zoe shook her hand a little, but this only made him grip tighter and with his tail and toes. Fighting back tears, she picked the rat up gently by the fur on the back of his neck and placed him carefully on the grass. Once again, Armitage didn't move. Instead, he just looked up at her longingly. Zoe knelt down and kissed him gently on his pink little nose. "Goodbye, little fellow," she whispered. "I am going to miss you." A tear dropped from her eye. It landed on Armitage's whiskers, and his tiny pink tongue slipped out to catch it. The little rat tilted his little head to one side, as if trying to understand her, which just made it harder for Zoe. In fact, saying goodbye was so unbearably sad, she just couldn't take it anymore. Zoe took a big breath and stood up and promised herself she would not look back. That promise lasted only a dozen steps, as she couldn't help stealing a glance one last time to the spot where she left him. To Zoe's surprise, Armitage was already gone. He must have already scampered off to the safety of the bushes, she thought. She scoured the nearby grass for signs of movement, but it was tall and he was short, and apart from a light breeze blowing the tips, the grass didn't move. Zoe turned round and reluctantly headed home. Leaving the park, she crossed the road. For a moment, it was free of the hum of cars, and in the silence, Zoe thought she heard a tiny eek. She spun round, and in the middle of the road was Armitage. He had been following her all along. "Armitage!" she exclaimed excitedly. He didn't want to be free. He wanted to be with her. She was so glad. She had been imagining all kinds of awful scenarios from the moment she left him behind, like Armitage being gobbled by a vicious swan, or wandering into a road and being hit by a 10-ton truck. At that moment, something came thundering along the road towards Armitage, who was still scampering slowly across to join Zoe. It was a 10-ton truck. Zoe stood frozen, watching the truck, speeding closer and closer towards Armitage. The driver would never spot a baby rat in the road, and Armitage would be flattened and be nothing more than a splat on the tarmac. "No!" cried Zoe, but the truck thundered on. There was nothing she could do. Armitage looked in the direction of the truck and, realising he was in trouble, started scampering back and forth across the road. The little rat was in a terrible panic, but if Zoe ran into the road, she would be flattened too. It was too late. The truck roared over him, and Zoe covered her eyes with her hands. Rumble! Only when she could hear the truck's engine fading into the distance did Zoe dare open her eyes again. She looked for the splat on the road, but it wasn't there. What was there? Was Armitage. A little shaken perhaps, but alive. The lorry's giant tyres must have just missed him. Looking right and left and right again to check there were no cars, Zoe ran into the road and scooped him up. "I am not letting you go, ever," said Zoe as she held him close. Armitage let out a little